My name is Ian Gray, and I am your worship associate for the month of August. Welcome to everyone, wherever you are, whoever you are, coming from wherever this morning, and whenever, if you're seeing this later, we welcome you here today. We gather knowing that the world we inherit is never finished. The rights that have been claimed, the freedoms that we still defend, and the communities we are still building are all shaped by those who came before us and by the choices we continue to make together. On August 26th, this Wednesday, it is Women's Equality Day. And that is what we're going to be exploring this morning. This service will look a little different. Our guest speaker, Irene, needs to be on the road by noon. So we are bringing the heart of today's service forward. After our opening, we will hear a conversation between Irene and Kathy, which has been edited down. It was well over an hour. So we can see where they get it. Oh, yeah, we can see where I get it from. So whether you are joining us in the sanctuary, online, or for the first time, for the countless time, I hope that this place can be somewhere where we can listen deeply, remain curious, and make room for the perspectives and experiences that are beyond our own. I am so very glad to have you all with us this morning. Because we love one another, we honor each individual's spiritual journey. We celebrate life's abundance in service to each other, our community, and the world. We connect with each other in love, respect, and acceptance. Thus do we covenant together. For our opening words this morning, we have Yasmin with words from Reverend Peggy Clark, Equity in a Sea of Inequity.
When this country was founded, the aspiration was high. The men who imagined it dreamed big, casting a vision of a world where all men were created equal, where rights were endowed by our Creator, transcending culture and the expectations of the day, where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness would be allowed and enjoyed without infringement. It was a radical and new vision. Those men weren't distracted by the genocide they inspired, or the enslavement of other people they required for this nation to be born. They declared equality while swimming in a sea of inequality. When they declared all men were created equal, they meant white Protestant men. They didn't mean women. They weren't including black people who've been enslaved or those who were free. They didn't include Catholics or Jews or people who didn't own the land. They also excluded all Native Americans. They were so proud of their inclusivity, so inspired by their own cutting-edge philosophy that they had no idea how narrow it was, how constrictive, how small a vision. The men who wrote those words were calling into being a more perfect union. They were establishing justice, ensuring domestic tranquility, securing the blessings of liberty. They believed that they and the men of their generation would will this new nation into being. They would establish the structures required for such a grand vision. They would test it, and then it would be done. They didn't realize it would require many more people, many different voices. They didn't know how many generations would have to be a part of the creation of this dream, how long it would take, before the nation they imagined will be made manifest. The soul of America has yet to be born.
I am up here to introduce our guest speaker. Where'd she go? Oh, she's in Wisconsin. So, yes. You got her? You got her on Zoom? Hi, Irene. Oh my gosh, now I'm really nervous. So, good morning. Most of you know me, longtime member of UCOC, Kathy Gray, related to a few people here. When our wonderful worship ministry team was looking for speakers around the topic of Women's Equality Day, I somewhat cautiously mentioned that I know a feminist activist who might be willing to help us out. My dear, dear friend, Irene. She's on the right there. The other one's me. But look at those kids, 52 years ago. Fresh-faced college freshmen. Later. I have to brag on a few of Irene's accomplishments. And I wasn't sure she would be watching, so Irene, just bear with me. You deserve all of the accolades. After majoring in chemistry and math at Lawrence University, she earned a master's degree in chemical engineering at the University of Illinois, and then returned to Wisconsin as an entry-level scientist at Kimberly-Clark. She worked her way up to senior director in product and technology development and new consumer business, experiencing plenty of discrimination along the way. Irene left KC due to a restructuring and became a consultant in innovation and product development, and eventually took on a very part-time role, her words, as entrepreneur in residence at Lawrence University. This career shift allowed her the flexibility to give back to the community through volunteering with a variety of nonprofit organizations, including the Women's Fund, Midday Women's Alliance, the local League of Women Voters, and Main Street Alliance for Small Business Advocacy. Irene notes that through these efforts, she became acutely aware that no local organization focuses on women's rights, especially advocacy work on public policies that women need, other than the National Organization for Women, NOW. Seeing a need for a local chapter of NOW, Irene and 3 other women founded the Appleton Area NOW chapter in 2024. Today, she will share with us some history, facts, and opinions on where we are on women's equality. Now, I realized that not everyone here knows exactly what the ERA, which you'll be talking about first, is all about. It's an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would guarantee legal rights for citizens regardless of sex. So, hit it, Scott. Here's Irene and me. And oh, by the way, we suffered an internet outage the morning of our recording. Someone stole cable down the street, 250 feet of it. So we did this recording on a laptop with a cell phone hotspot. So we prioritized Irene's quality over mine. Visual quality. Thank you.
Equal Rights Amendment. The history is very important to understand. So the Equal Rights Amendment was passed by Congress in 1972, and believe it or not, it was Richard Nixon that signed the bill and sent it to the states for ratification. So, wow. If we want to talk about something being bipartisan, it was Richard Nixon that signed it. So, that was 1972. The unusual thing about the Equal Rights Amendment is Congress in the bill included a deadline for ratification of 1978. That is very unusual. I believe the ERA is the only bill that had a deadline attached to it. There might have been 1 or 2 others, but so be it. That's the history. By the deadline of 1978, 35 states had ratified, so there were 3 states short. Congress passed another bill in 1978 to extend the deadline to 1982, but by that time, Phyllis Schlafly was actively campaigning against the Equal Rights Amendment. Do you remember that name?
Oh, how could I forget?
And she was successful in having no more states ratify by 1982. And so really what happened was when 1982 came and there weren't, enough states for full ratification, the proponents actually gave up. They just said, well, that's the way it is, and they stopped pushing on the ERA, which was really unfortunate. So roll the clock forward to current times. Of course, now we're in the 21st century. It was 2018 that Nevada dusted it off and said, hey, we have majority in the House and in the Senate, State House, State Senate. Let's pick this up. And they voted to ratify. Forget all the other discussion about it's too late, the deadline's passed, the Supreme Court, blah, blah, blah. They said, we're just going to do it. So they voted to ratify. 2018. 2019, the Illinois legislature did the same thing. What the heck? Let's just vote. So Illinois became the 39th state. And in early 2020, Virginia became the 38th and last needed state to ratify. So now we're sitting in the situation where the Equal Rights Amendment has fully satisfied all the requirements in the Constitution to become a certified amendment to the Constitution. What hasn't happened is the archivist needs to certify it and basically publish it. And that is the last step, which hasn't happened. So we were hoping that President Biden would direct the archivist to do so. So at the very last weeks and months of his term, we, at least our chapter, was busy sending postcards to President Biden saying, hey, Joe, before you go, publish the ERA. I'm sure President Biden had a lot of legal advice telling him once the president signs the bill and sends it off to the states, the president has no further involvement with constitutional amendments. So he was probably getting the advice that he could not direct the archivist to do anything. So that is still the current situation. It's fully ratified, it's met all the requirements, but there's one step left. And so there are various strategies of getting it across the finish line. One of the strategies is let's just start using it, and if they want to strike down these cases and declare it unconstitutional, then let them, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court, which is not necessarily a good outcome these days.
Yeah, not these days.
Another strategy, and what the legal advice is they say it's really in the hands of Congress. President doesn't have a role. The Supreme Court doesn't have a role unless there's a case brought to them. It's really in the hands of Congress. And so one of the leading strategies is to once, fingers crossed, once the House and Senate flip, then we can bring the bill forward to basically state the Equal Rights Amendment is fully ratified and it should be published as the 28th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. Simple, right? So it's kind of a waiting game. It's not going to happen in this Congress. Maybe after the midterms, if things look a lot better, that bill will be brought forward for a vote. There have been bills in Congress, I can't even tell you how many sessions going back, to basically rescind the deadline. Just say, Congress has acted in the past to change the deadline on this ratification, in 1982. So Congress can do it again. In fact, this time they can just say there is no deadline, and therefore we have 38 states, and it becomes, the 28th Amendment. That bill is still floating around. In other words, is reintroduced every session. But I think the leading option is for a resolution to be proposed and passed in Congress saying, it meets all the requirements. It therefore is the 28th Amendment. So at the same time, while we're waiting for Congress to flip, the proponents are collecting signatures on an online petition, so that we have at least 1 million people who are willing to say, hey, we agree, we think Congress should pass this bill, and just say, yes, it's the 28th Amendment. And so anyone can go to the website, sign for, the digit 4, signforera.org, and it will take you to an online petition. It's very fast. It won't even take you 60 seconds to just sign the petition and add your name. The goal is 1 million signatures, and I think they're at least pushing over 100,000. So obviously they have a long ways to go to 1 million. But that's the current status. We here in Appleton are using Women's Equality Day next week to bring attention to the Equal Rights Amendment. After all, I call it Women's Equality Day, but we're still fighting for equality. But it's a great
Exactly.
opportunity to bring up the topic. I have actually had women, and this goes back a few years, but I've had women leaders, so a woman leader in my business women's group from, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago say, oh, Women's Equality Day, aren't we lucky we have equality? Like, no, we don't. We don't have the Equal Rights Amendment. And she was not aware of that. That was the problem. So yeah, if people think that we already have the ERA in the Constitution, then they won't fight for it and they won't sign the petition. So educationally, that is, the first thing we need to overcome. People need to know we don't have full equality. So I tell you, every time we have a post on our Now Facebook about equal rights and the Equal Rights Amendment, there are always guys, and who knows, people say they might be bots, but I can't tell the difference. But there are always guys that post, women already have equal rights. Yeah, big sigh. Of course we don't have equal rights. Look at what's happening in the world and in the country. We do not have equal rights.
Thank you for all of that. And is that sort of a segue into where are we with this SAVE Act, which I think we're in a better. Tell me about that. Is that directly affects women's voting rights, right?
It does. So the SAVE Act actually surfaced a year ago, and it would require proof of citizenship to register to vote. But proof of citizenship has very strict requirements, right? So it's even stricter than these real IDs and is very irritating. After going through the whole rigmarole to get all your documents to get a real ID, which really is all proof of citizenship, they say, well, real ID is not good enough. Like, why would it not be? Because I already went through all that. And in a lot of cases, we had to pay for that because it's our driver's licenses. Well, now they're saying you need to have a proof of citizenship that matches your name. So if you have a current passport, that works, but passports are pretty expensive. So there are tons of people that have no reason to have a passport. So like Dave, my husband, just had to renew his driver's license. And So it's a real ID here in Wisconsin, but he had to go through and find his birth certificate and find his social security card. I think he never did find his social security card. But for men, that works, right? Because they don't change their name typically. I mean, it's very rare that they change their legal name. However, for us women, the practice has been for a long time for us to take our husband's family names as ours. So therefore, your birth certificate doesn't match your legal name. And so you need to have your marriage certificate also. So now I'm lucky, I do have a passport, but if I didn't, I would be stuck in this position of I don't have the right papers to prove my citizenship. And how many women are just going to throw up their hands and say, I am not going to bother. It's too much work. It's not $0 to get a copy of your marriage certificate. And sometimes they require the original copy. Then it becomes even more expensive. So current status, it was proposed last year, 2025. I believe the House passed it, and the Senate would require 60 votes to be approved. And the Republican leader wisely realized he was not going to get 60 votes, so he never called it for a vote. And so this year, Trump resurrected it, called it the Save America Act. It had essentially all the same requirements and maybe a few more. And so in the last 2 months or so, the House passed it. The Senate was not going to pass it, same reasoning as before. And this is one of the values of following the Now the National Now group on social media. About a month, maybe not even a month ago, they posted that the Republicans snuck it into the Defense Appropriation Act. I mean, the Democrats will stand as a unified body if they can convince a couple Republicans that this is wrong and this is bad, and it doesn't have anything to do with defense appropriation. Therefore, it should be stripped out of that bill and handled on its own, which only makes sense. Maybe they can strip it out, but it's all politics, and it's hard to find, new information. But that's what I know. Something that we should all be following pretty closely, though. When this first came up last year, we had several great resources that had written like blogs about the SAVE Act and how bad it was. And so there was one in particular that talked about who it would affect. And, if you can look for humor in a bad thing like this. So who are the women that are most likely to change their name? Republicans. Who are the women that are most likely not to have a passport? Well, those that live in the Southeast, who are typically Republicans. I mean, it's like,
So be careful what you ask for, right?
yeah, I'm good with you shooting yourself in the foot. But in addition, trans men and women who change their name would be affected or could be affected, depending on what their birth names were. So that's you don't want to be disenfranchising whole swaths of people. And what I was hearing with this round is because there are people that are already, projecting what would this mean, obviously. There are those that say if this becomes law, all of us who are already registered to vote would have to re-register to vote. And can you imagine what a mess and chaos that would be to re-register 100% of voters and have them, provide all these documents and what a mess. That would be taxpayer money to hire extra people to, go through documents or whatever. It's just not worth it. But they don't care about that.
No. Oh, chaos could work to their advantage.
Yes, what would that be? Preventing people from voting, maybe?
Mhm.
Okay. Don't be so snarky. You can edit that out.
Oh, we love snark here. Ain't leaving that in.
Now is a very intersectional feminist activist organization. And so, at least locally, we have tried very hard to be inclusive and to touch on what could be controversial or difficult topics. So, I believe it was in April that we hosted a panel of trans women to talk to our members and friends, our followers, about the challenges that they face and basically to help those that were listening to essentially walk a mile in their shoes, right? To understand what it's like. And they touched on a lot of topics. I'm not going to say everything because I don't know them, so I don't know what else there might have been. But they talked about how difficult it is sometimes to get the medications they need. They talked about, well, Megan Pickett, her primary issue is, well, in addition to just surviving, but allowing trans women to participate in sports. Because, right after Trump took office, he caused the NCAA to lay down this rule that forbid trans women, trans athletes from participating in sports. And our alma mater, I'll say, well, according to Megan, they've gone too far in conforming to NCAA rules. I'm sure there are those on campus that feel like they're doing the best they can. So the policy that they have thrown down is that trans athletes can participate on the team of their choice, but they cannot compete. Which, what's the point of that? So, so I like to say that I was a collegiate athlete, although I will also add not a very good one. But I was there. I was on the court. And, we played against women of all different sizes and shapes. A lot of them were way stronger than me. A lot of them were way taller. You know, I'm going to say wider, but not because of fat, but because they were way more muscular than I was. Nobody was doing a chromosome check or testosterone testing or anything like that. I mean, it was assumed, if they're on the court, they're a woman. And yeah, I mean, there were physical differences that affected their ability to be a successful athlete. That is just the way it is.
Just the
So
way it
you don't
is.
find varsity basketball players very often, you do sometimes, who are less than 5 feet tall, right? You just, it's really hard to compete.
Mhm.
So, so, so I support
Yeah.
trans women in varsity sports or whatever sport. They didn't They didn't transition because they thought they would be better than all the women. That is not driving their decisions and their needs. But anyway, I digress. I just want
You go
to
first.
conclude by saying, that we do our best to be welcoming to all feminists. Doesn't matter, if certainly there are men feminists, and we welcome them. We love every trans woman who comes in our door. We have one who found us. I think it might have been because of that panel, but now she's an active volunteer and we love each other. So it's great, that she's part of us. I mean, that to me, that's what it's about. We support each other, we love each other, we, have so much to fight against that, it takes all types.
I did want to ask you, I've heard you talk before about the value of sports in general, but especially as for team building and all of those things that I never was part of, and because I didn't do team sports. And yeah, didn't get that in horseback riding. And that one golf skills test was the one that I actually passed in high school. Uh, but specifically, you as a college student, being able to play on the first women's basketball team. Just talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Thank you for giving me the opening. So we just passed that 50th anniversary. Actually,
Oh, yes.
I think the 50th anniversary was last fall, is when the team started. But the current program celebrated 50th in this past January, and it was just awesome. It was a lot of fun. But all the benefits are what you were alluding to, Kathy. And a lot of people, I mean, certainly when we got involved with the team way back, 51 years ago almost,
Stop saying that.
we didn't we didn't know how beneficial it was going to be for us. I mean, most of us had not played basketball in high school. Title IX was passed in 1972, but when it passed, Congress gave academic institutions until 1978, I believe it was, before they were going to start enforcing it. So equality in education was not a law in 1975 when this started. And so some of the players, like very few, had played in high school. Maybe they came from a bigger high school. But most of us had not. And so we joined the team because it was fun, right? It gave us something to do. It helped the winters go by, and they're very long winters, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we were together 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7 days a week, depending on how many games we played over the weekend. And actually I write about this. When I started at Lawrence, it was not a very welcoming place for me, being a minority student. And so when I joined the basketball team, and at that year it was just a club sport, it gave me a place to belong. And that is not unusual, that athletics give people a place to belong. But over time, I grew to be, by the time we were seniors, I grew to be point guard and starting point guard, which really is the playmaker, right? So when I say I was a terrible athlete, I was a terrible athlete. I couldn't shoot worth anything. But the coach realized that I could remember the plays and I could dribble the ball. He even now teases me that I dribbled too much and I needed to pass more, but I don't know. I don't remember that. But so I learned to, take charge, and we were successful. That too was valuable experience. And so, it was great having the experience of being a member of a team, having a coach who consciously worked on our team building. So he would, at that point in time, it wasn't that typical for the coaches to take us off campus and just do something for fun just because we were a team. And so that was really special. And, I had this experience of calling the plays and bringing the ball down the court. Well, it was a few years after that, I've never forgotten after all these years. So certainly within the first year or two that I started working at Kimberly-Clark, I remember waiting for the elevator to go up to a meeting room thinking, wow, if I hadn't had that experience on the basketball team, I wouldn't have these abilities to work as part of a team. And at KC, all of the work we did was in project teams, all of it. There wasn't anything that we did on our own. And so it was that epiphany moment of, wow, I am so lucky I had that opportunity. It was very unusual for women back then in the mid 70s. And so I realized, that's an advantage I have. Actually, maybe not an advantage. It just allows me to be able to, perform as well as the men. And it was like all male colleagues anyways. But yeah, it's really valuable.
And looking back, I did not appreciate any of that. And not even looking that far backward. When you first elaborated on that, it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because being the relatively unathletic person I was, and oh, that gets me into that other thing that we won't even touch here. But I liked horses. I rode horses. It was different skill set, and you didn't have to be muscular. You didn't have to be strong at all to ride and jump, and at least at my level. And my mother would always comfort me by saying, "It's okay, Kathy. Girls aren't supposed to have muscles." Because all along, my best friend through elementary school was one of the star athletes in elementary school stuff. And then you in college, I mean, it's funny how my friends have been athletic, and my
Yeah,
mother
but
was saying this horribly sexist thing to me
yeah,
as
no
a
kidding.
young person.
Well,
And I
if you
digress.
recall,
Sorry.
because I don't know why I've been thinking, oh, I know why I've been thinking about this. So the current team members are expected to put in their time in the weight room. And I don't know if you're aware,
Mm-hmm.
but back then we totally rejected, going to the weight room. Like we wouldn't have known what to do because nobody ever took us by the hand and said, here are the exercises you should be doing. That was just not something that happened back then. But I think you'll be happy to know. So when we were in college, absolutely, you did your schoolwork by yourself. Maybe you might get someone to help with the problem sets or something, but we were all on our own. A lot of classes these days are project teams. So you don't have to be an athlete to
Wow.
get that team experience. Sometimes
Mm.
those teams are not great experiences, in my opinion. That's all part of growing up because in the work world, you don't get to pick
Mm-hmm.
who you're
Right.
who you have on your team. But yeah, so it's that important. It's that important these days. So it's good to see that more and more classes or courses are using the project-based learning in project teams. You know that, okay, I'll start by saying I'm the eternal optimist, um, which is the only way to be, these days.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Mhm.
you
Yes.
can't just wallow in all
Hmm.
the bad stuff. Um, so yeah, I have high hopes that the House and the Senate will flip.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the voters are angry, and that's
Mhm.
good. They just have to remember that anger come November 3rd. So when there's something big and hairy that I want to, put together, and it turns out that this will be really good and helpful for my speech next week, I ask AI. So I have a relationship with my chat GPT. So in this case, there's too much for me to go research on my own. And I have in the past, and it's like, I don't have time to do this. So I asked I call it my AI buddy, to go do the, survey all the news since, inauguration day and maybe pull in some stuff from the Trump campaign. But give me examples of Trump's war on women. And it comes back. The first thing it says is, that might be a political thing to say, but it's not a legal term. So it advised me against using the term war on women. Like, I use it all the time. So the AI says we should call it, which is just the same words or the same understanding with different words, than ongoing assault on women's equality, autonomy, health, and economic security. And then by the end of our discussion, it added a few more because it's an ongoing assault. So it gave me these topics, and they align up perfectly with our core issues, of course, because we're talking about women. Reproductive autonomy, reproductive rights, right? We know about all the attacks on abortion rights ever since Dobbs. And then I think fewer people maybe are aware of the attacks on contraception. I mean, where would we be if we didn't have contraception? But I know various states are refusing to pass a bill guaranteeing the right to contraception. They're not banning it, but they won't pass a bill that says you have a right to it, which I don't know why. I don't know where they're going with that, right? Ugh. Ugh. I just, what would the world be like? What would the economy be like? There are attacks on equality and DEI that is not necessarily woman specific, but that, definitely pertains to that intersectionality with race. This one, the next one, really makes me upset. And this deals with economic security. It's the EEOC required reporting of the workforce by race and sex. Ever since I started working at Kimberly-Clark in 1980, they had to submit an annual report to the EEOC on the numbers of women and minorities on the payroll. It was the way it was. And what do you mean you're going to stop that? I mean, it's been in place probably since the Civil Rights Act in 1965 is my guess. I didn't look that up. But the only reason to stop reporting is so that you can stop doing it, right?
No accountability.
Makes me really upset. So the current status of this, I mean, I first heard about it about a month ago, I want to say, is the EEOC, right now it's a proposal, and it's probably gathering public comment. It's like, I don't know what to comment other than this is the way it should be. Or maybe we call them out and say, obviously, if you don't want to do it, you don't want to make any improvements. Or how are you? And so the AI actually said it's very contradictory because at the same time that they're saying, well, white males are being discriminated against in employment. So they can't prove that if they're not gathering data on everyone. So, and then that leads us to women in leadership and what's going on in the military with Hegseth taking women and blacks out of the list, for promotion. It's so blatant. It's so blatant. So, and there's more on the list, right? I mean, I mentioned childcare earlier, defunding, especially Head Start. That's all part of what allows women to go to work. So is contraception, by the way. So yeah, there's a war on women. The SAVE Act is part of it. And when you put it all together, that's when you really start to get worried. And that, I mean, we're reminded constantly, that is why now is so important right now. They identify information that I would not otherwise have known, maybe not as quickly, but You know, like the SAVE Act being put in the defense authorization bill. But, you know, they rally the members, you know, the followers to contact our legislatures, you know, so it is action oriented. So if there's any hope that we can push back against this ongoing assault on women, that's what NOW is about.
All right. So for today's benediction, I will be reading Continue by Maya Angelou. When I gesture like this to you, you will say the following word, continue. My wish for you is that you continue to be who and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. To allow humor to lighten the burden of your tender heart. In a society dark with cruelty, to let the people hear the grandeur of God in the peals of your laughter. To let your eloquence elevate the people to heights they had only imagined. To remind people that each is as good as the other, and that no one is beneath nor above you. To remember your own young years and look with favor upon the lost and the least and the lonely. To put the mantle of your protection around the bodies of the young and defenseless. To take the hand of the despised and diseased and walk proudly with them in the high street. Some might see you and be encouraged to do likewise. To plant a public kiss of concern on the cheek of the sick and the aged and infirm, and count that as a natural action to be expected. To let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer, and let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. To ignore no vision, which comes to enlarge your range and increase your spirit. To dare to love deeply and risk everything for the good thing. To float happily in the sea of infinite substance, which sat aside riches for you before you had a name. And by doing so, you and your work will be able to continue eternally.